The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Sunday, February 15th. Your reader for the first hour will be Edwin J. Vieira, and for the second hour, your reader will be Florine Melnick. First, a look at the weather. Cloudy today at a high of 39, but low clouds tonight and a low of 30. Cloudy tomorrow to start off the work week, high of 36 and a low of 34. Tuesday, it'll be some variable cloudiness with a high of 38 and a low of 32, but Wednesday will bring in periods of rain with a high of 44 and a low of 33. Low clouds may break on Thursday with a high of 37 and a low of 27. Friday, you'll see a bit of ice in the morning with a high of 34 and a low of 27. And going into the weekend, a bit of afternoon snow on Saturday with a high of 28 and a low of 21. And now, here's our first story. Unseating Hochul would be an uphill battle for Blakeman, GOP candidate largely unknown in Deep Blue, New York. Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman found himself in a familiar place Wednesday, celebrating an unlikely political victory on Long Island. Just like 2021 and 2025, when Blakeman won elections in a county where Democrats outnumber Republicans by nearly 71,000 active voters, his bid to be this year's Republican gubernatorial candidate appeared to be against the odds. When Blakeman launched his campaign in December, nearly every county Republican chair in New York and the state's party chair Ed Cox had already endorsed Representative Elise Stefanik, a high-profile congressional Republican. A Siena University poll that month showed Republicans preferred Stefanik to Blakeman 48% to 17%. Stefanik's campaign spokesperson called Blakeman, quote, an early Christmas present to Kathy Hochul as he works to blow Republicans' best chance to win. 2 months later, though, Blakeman is the Republican Party's only chance to win. On Wednesday, Blakeman took the stage at the Republican State Convention at the Garden City Hotel. Republicans, including Cox, cheered him. Stefanik's former campaign manager, Erie County Republican Committee Chair Michael Kriker, seconded Blakeman's nomination. Stefanik had bowed out in December, allowing Blakeman to win the GOP nomination without a fight. If Blakeman hopes to unseat Hochul in November, it will take the best fight New York Republicans have put up in 24 years. Among active New York voters, Democrats outnumber Republicans by nearly 3.2 million people. Even if one combined Republican and conservative voters, the Democratic advantage remains roughly 2-1. Another 3.5 million voters are registered in other parties or unaffiliated. For Blakeman, it's possible, but very hard, said Robert Bellafiore, a former Associated Press political reporter and senior advisor to Governor George Pataki, the last Republican governor and candidate to win statewide office. He needs to run a flawless campaign that transcends ideology and resonates with voters' everyday lives. And for him to win, Hochul needs to run a historically awful campaign, and even then, it's a long shot. On Wednesday, when Pataki reminded Republicans at the convention of his past success as a Republican in a Democrat-dominated state, he also spoke to Democrats saying, quote, take a look. Don't vote based on your party, but based on what's right for your family, for your kids, and for your grandkids. In 1994, the little-known state senator from Peekskill upset three-term incumbent Governor Mario Cuomo by campaigning on a platform to restore New York's death penalty and cut taxes. Pataki's campaign was rooted in opposition to Cuomo, who was vulnerable despite romping to re-election in 1990 over an underwhelming Republican opponent, Pierre Rinfret. By 2002, after Pataki had witnessed Republicans lose 3 statewide races to Democrats during his tenure, Pataki leaned increasingly centrist. He convinced the Republican-controlled Senate to pass bills for gun control, gay rights, and hate crimes. He courted labor leaders and Latino voters, opposing the U.S. Navy's test bombing on the Puerto Rican island of Vieques. Ultimately, he defeated H. Carl McCall to win the third term, and even then, Pataki won with less than half, 49% of the vote. Blakeman, facing no primary opponent, could opt to move to the center to win votes from moderates and Democrats. But if anything, Blakeman has only doubled down on Republican positions, most prominently his support for President Donald Trump. While Siena polls show President Trump's popularity has significantly dropped in New York over the last 14 months, Blakeman pledged at the convention to, quote, always have his back. And Blakeman continues to strongly support U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement even after an ICE officer in Minneapolis fatally shot Renee Nicole Good, age 37, on January 7th, and Customs and Border Protection officers fatally shot Alex Peretti, also 37, on January 24th. The most recent Siena poll, released February 3rd, showed New Yorkers, including overwhelming numbers of Democrats, independents, and moderates, believe ICE officers have gone too far in their tactics. Hochul, who has slammed ICE, recently proposed a law to prohibit local law enforcement agencies, including county sheriffs, from allowing their officers to work as ICE deputies on immigration raids, which is permitted under a 1996 federal law. Blakeman not only opposes Hochul's bill, but he chose as his running mate Madison County Sheriff Todd Hood, whose county has such an agreement with ICE. Blakeman's stances on ICE and support for Trump may cement his standing with Republican voters, but hurt his chances to win over the larger voting group of Democrats, independents, and unaffiliated voters, some of whom may have been drawn by Blakeman's support for abortion rights and gun control positions that drew criticism from Stefanik. Hochul's campaign team has repeatedly drawn attention to Blakeman's support for Trump and ICE. If the campaign is about Trump, it's even harder for Blakeman to win, Bellafiore said. He has to make it about his opponent and what he can do to help solve problems. David Catalfano, a former chief spokesperson for Pataki, said that to win in November, Blakeman needs to make the race a referendum on Hochul and the direction of the state, not Trump. You have to distill the race that way, and if you distill the race in that way, Kathy Hochul is a historically unpopular candidate, Catalfano said. Does she have the same negatives as Andrew Cuomo? Not in the same way, but when you look at the ballot test, while she's improved some, she's still under 50%. Blakeman, age 70, of Atlantic Beach, has cast the Buffalo-born Hochul, age 67, who took office in August 2021 and was reelected in 2022, as a governor responsible for New York's affordability issues. He alleged Hochul is anti-law enforcement and is beholden to radicals. Kathy Hochul has sold out New Yorkers and made a deal with extremists who don't share our values, Blakeman told the convention crowd, adding that Hochul has aligned herself with, quote, big government socialists, such as New York City Mayor Zohar Mamdani and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of Queens. Blakeman's message resonated with Republicans inside the Garden City Hotel, which matches the findings of the recent Siena poll, released in February. It showed that in a would-be race against Hochul, Republicans preferred Blakeman 69 to 15%. Conservative-minded voters also preferred Blakeman to Hochul. The poll indicated New York voters are still mostly unfamiliar with Blakeman. When asked if they have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of him, 62% said they didn't know or had no opinion. That number had been 70% in December. Another 18% said they had a favorable view of Blakeman, up 5 points from December, while 20% said they had an unfavorable view, up 3 points from December. 9 months from Election Day, Siena pollster Steve Greenberg said in a statement, Blakeman, largely unknown to 3 in 5 New York voters, has his work cut out for him. For ICE detainees, release relies on the luck of the draw. Judges have latitude in interpreting government stance on bonds and detention. After Border Patrol agents smashed their car window outside of a North Tonawanda hotel to arrest them, 3 detained Guatemalan men followed the same legal path trying to get out of the federal detention center in Batavia. They had the same lawyer. Their habeas corpus petitions were filed on the same day in federal court. And they made the same legal arguments against the Trump administration's push for mandatory detention for all those who entered the country illegally and faced deportation. Each asked a federal judge to grant them a hearing before an immigration judge who could order their release on bond if convinced they pose no danger to the community, and would show up for future hearings as their immigration cases proceeded. But one thing was different about their cases: the judge handling each of their petitions. 2 of the detainees gained a favorable ruling within 10 days, one from U.S. District Judge Lawrence Bilardo in Buffalo, the other from U.S. District Judge Meredith Vaca in Rochester. Both were released on a $5,000 bond. The other gave up after waiting almost a month. His status could not be determined. The judge who handled his case was U.S. District Judge John L. Sinatra, Jr. The debate over what to do about immigrants who have entered the country illegally or as refugees has been playing out for months in government offices and on the streets of American cities. But it is also a daily occurrence in federal courtrooms. The contrasting outcomes in the U.S. District Court of the Western District of New York and across the country that determine whether a defendant is jailed or released are all based on how the judge handling the case interprets the law and the government's contention that detention is mandatory. It's the luck of the draw, defense lawyer Matthew Borowski, who handled all three cases, told the Buffalo News. If you get Judge Villardo, in some cases, you can expect an order for a bond hearing in a week. If you get Judge Sinatra, the case will sit for several months. If and when a detainee gets a decision from Sinatra, he'll deny it, Borowski said. The News reviewed all of the habeas corpus petitions filed in Buffalo and Rochester between September 1st, 2025 and January 31st of this year, numbering in the hundreds. Voluntary dismissals are not unusual for those whose petitions come before Sinatra. Among the 50-plus petitions before Sinatra, a Trump nominee who was approved by the Senate in 2019, one-third were voluntarily dropped by the detainees, and the judge denied at least 8 others. The other petitions before Sinatra remained pending as of February 6th. Villardo, in contrast, who was nominated by former President Barack Obama, did not deny any of the petitions before him. Villardo has granted at least 45 habeas corpus petitions since September, or 3 of every 4 petitions before him. Only a couple of detainees dropped their petitions that Villardo presided over. The rest were pending as of February 6th. By statute, aliens who enter the U.S. illegally and remain illegally may be detained by the government for removal proceedings without a bond hearing, Sinatra said in his December 4th ruling. This outcome is driven by a straightforward and fair reading of the governing statute. His ruling did not fall in line with earlier rulings on the issue from Villardo, Vaca, and Chief U.S. District Judge Elizabeth Woolford, or most federal judges across the country. In his ruling, Sinatra acknowledged the decisions from other courts, saying he was, quote, persuaded by some, but not persuaded by others. The fact that more district courts nevertheless have decided this issue differently from this court is neither binding nor persuasive, Sinatra said in his ruling. Overwhelming consensus. Borowski, who has represented more than one-third of the 100-plus detainees with petitions before Villardo or Sinatra since September, said some 286 court decisions from around the country have rejected the government's argument that defendants can't be released. Borowski said he is aware of only about 24 decisions favoring or partially favoring the administration's position. The fact that the 3 other federal judges in the Western New York District have ruled differently, quote, calls into question Sinatra's ruling, he said in a court filing. The sheer volume of favorable decisions versus unfavorable shows where the weight of authority lies on this matter, he said. The administration's position has been rejected by judges all over the ideological and geographical spectrum, he added. Few novel legal issues in history have been litigated so frequently across the country over such a short period of time, resulting in an overwhelming course of agreement from federal judges, he said. Given the overwhelming consensus, Borowski has asked Sinatra to avoid a split and follow the well-reasoned rationale of the other judges in the district. District judges are not bound by decisions from fellow district judges. The Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, whose decisions set binding precedent on district courts in New York, Vermont, and Connecticut, has yet to rule on appeals cases over the habeas corpus cases. By the time the Second Circuit speaks on this issue, these people may very well be deported, Borowski said. The Supreme Court ruling in the summer that limited nationwide injunctions from district judges has led to what Borowski called an extremely rare situation where so many judges from across the country have ruled on the same issue in such a short period of time. But it's a deluge of lawsuits. Different circumstances of immigrants' illegal entries into the U.S. can trigger different sections of federal law with different implications. Federal law limits the jurisdiction and powers of most U.S. district judges in immigration cases, but judges have used their position to make sure the rules are followed. For decades, many immigrants facing deportation were granted bonds, releasing them from detention until immigration judges decided their cases, which could take years. But in a dramatic policy shift in July, the Trump administration said immigrants detained after illegally entering and living in the U.S. are no longer entitled to a bond. The administration interpreted immigration law as not just allowing detention, but requiring it. Immigration judges who are employees of the U.S. Justice Department began denying bonds. A deluge of habeas corpus petitions followed, most of them specifically citing the new administration policy. In Rochester, the two judges saw 15 petitions in the first 8 months of 2025. They handled 76 in the last 4 months of the year. In Buffalo, federal judges handled 26 petitions in the first 8 months of 2025. They dealt with 131 in the last 4 months. The detainees came from at least 34 countries, with those from Guatemala and Ecuador accounting for 1 of every 4 petitions. Their ages ranged from 18 to 63, with half of the filers under the age of 30, and 18 detainees had lived here in the U.S. for 20 years or longer, with 1 here for 30 years. Half of the detainees had lived in the U.S. for at least 3 or more years. Many were detained during what they thought would be routine check-ins with immigration officers, which they had done without incident for years. Others were arrested while driving to work. Aggressive arrests involving physical altercations with Border Patrol or ICE agents appeared to be the exception, according to the court records. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has not released detainees from the Buffalo Federal Detention Facility, quote, all because of a policy change under the current executive administration, where a law previously used to detain non-citizens stopped at the border is now being interpreted as allowing the detention without bond of individuals who reside in this country, in some cases for years, Judge Wolford said in her ruling. Wolford has ordered bond hearings because the law does not allow for what, quote, administration officials claim it does. But historically, immigration officials have pointed to and relied on different sections of federal law that distinguish between those apprehended at the border and those who've lived in the U.S. for years or even decades. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:16 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:16 p.m. And now on to a front page feature. Analysis. Trump appeared much like a second-term leader this past week. President Trump had himself a week, just not the kind of political observer has become accustomed to, spending much of it behind closed doors while unable to broker a deal with Senate Democrats. He dissed a Republican icon over trade policy. He backed down on plans to exclude Democratic governors from an annual gathering of state chief executives. His border czar ended a contentious immigration enforcement surge in Minneapolis that left 2 American citizens dead. And a typically friendly pollster delivered a stinging rebuke. Trump was also noticeably subdued during an energy deregulation event Wednesday in the White House's Roosevelt Room, where coal industry leaders presented him with a trophy featuring a coal miner statue for being, quote, the undisputed champion of beautiful, clean coal. The president spoke in a tone that was lower than normal and took at least half a dozen friendly questions from right-leaning outlets. And he appeared to have little regard for statistics as he tried to downplay the power of the office to force down consumer prices. In my 3rd year, first term, I actually got prices down 0.25%. And I was so proud of myself because they were like that for years. And since, under Biden, they went up very, very substantially, he said. And now they're coming down by, depending on, you could say, 500, 600, 700%, depending on the way you want to, or you could say 80%. It doesn't matter. Then on Friday, Trump left town to spend the long President's Day weekend holiday at his South Florida resort and golf club, just when a major part of the sprawling Department of Homeland Security was hours away from shutting down, with the administration unable so far to reach a deal with Democratic senators. While Trump did not meet with any Senate Democrats before both chambers left town, he made a stop in Fort Bragg, North Dakota, during his Friday travels and was joined by 4 North Carolina Republicans. Senator Todd Budd and Representatives Richard Hudson, Brad Knott, and David Rouzer. As he departed, Trump told reporters over the loud idling engines of Marine One that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky risked missing a great opportunity, adding, quote, Russia wants to make a deal and Zelensky's going to have to get moving. But his latest example of toggling between the warring sides only underscored on his vow to end the conflict on day one of his second term some 389 days ago. White House aides have spent the past 2 weeks contending that the president did not want any federal offices to shutter. On Monday, the line outside of the West Wing was, as one official put it in a statement, President Trump has been consistent. He wants the government open, and the administration has been working with both parties to ensure American people don't have to endure another drawn-out, senseless, and hurtful shutdown. But by week's end, White House officials were mum on whether Trump was fine with DHS shutting down while the House and Senate take off next week. Multiple queries that end to the White House press office went unanswered. One Trump ally in the House, South Dakota Republican Dusty Johnson, cautioned against making too much of a relatively flat week from Team Trump. I think with life in D.C., there are lots of ups and downs. There's a lot of give and take. And I think one of the mistakes we make is that assuming just because the roller coaster went down the valley that it's never coming back up, he said in a brief interview Thursday. Some Democratic lawmakers in recent weeks have called on the president to dismiss certain aides involved in the mass deportation program. But Johnson, who's running for governor, said he was not ready to suggest Trump shake up his cabinet or West Wing staff. I'm not inclined to raise any particular concerns about staffing, he said. Ultimately, whoever's got the job has to have the confidence of the president. That's the most important thing. Still, Democratic strategist Brad Bannon said in a Friday email that, quote, Trump just had a dreadful week. Bad Bunny scored big. Melania, the movie, tanked deeply, and support for ICE melted quickly. One GOP senator facing a tough re-election battle said the president and other Republicans have got to do something about these prices. It's what I hear about most when I'm back home. They're just too high, said the senator, who requested anonymity to be candid. To that end, Trump's public remarks on the high prices have largely been dismissive. Political analysts have said that tone could hinder Republicans in the November midterms. The president told former aide turned Fox Business host Larry Kudlow this week he intends to campaign for GOP candidates, but again, suggested his party was headed for big losses. The problem is that historically, the president's won in 50 years 2 times. He said of voters typically punishing the president's party in midterm elections. I don't know what that is. There's something down, deep, psychological, and some of them were good presidents and they still lost. We're going to change that, I hope. We're trying very hard. During the same interview, Trump committed what would have been a stumble for any other Republican when he declared that the late Ronald Reagan was, quote, bad on trade. That prompted Kudlow, who also worked in the 40th president's White House, to push back saying Reagan was tougher than you think. Trump also raised eyebrows and drew criticism when the White House moved to not invite Democratic governors to an annual meeting between state chief executives and the president at the executive mansion, slated for this Friday. Under pressure, the White House relented with the National Governors Association, saying all governors would be able to attend, but 2 Democratic governors, Maryland's Wes Moore and Colorado's Jared Polis, have reportedly been excluded from a separate White House dinner. And now on to international news. Iranian officials use a national dragnet to arrest protesters. The Iranian security agents came at 2 a.m., pulling in half a dozen cars outside the home of the Naqi family. They woke up the sleeping sisters, Niusha and Mona, and forced them to give their passwords for their phones. Then they took the 2 away. The women were accused of participating in nationwide protests that shook Iran a week earlier, a friend of the pair told the Associated Press, speaking on condition of anonymity as she described the January 16th arrests. Such arrests have been happening for weeks following the government crackdown last month that crushed the protests calling for the end of the country's theocratic rule. Reports of raids on homes and workplaces have come from major cities and rural towns alike, revealing a dragnet that has touched large swaths of Iranian society. They are often held incommunicado for days or weeks and prevented contacting family members or lawyers, according to activists monitoring the arrests. That's left desperate relatives searching for their loved ones. The U.S.-based human rights activist news agency has put the number of arrests at more than 50,000. The AP has been unable to verify the figure. Tracking the detainees has been difficult since Iranian authorities imposed an internet blackout and reports leak out only with difficulty. Other activist groups outside of Iran have also been working to document the sweeps. Authorities continue to identify people and detain them, said Shiva Nazari, an organizer with one of the groups, the Committee for Monitoring the Status of Detained Protesters. So far, the committee has verified the names of more than 2,200 people who were arrested using direct reports from families and a network of contacts on the ground. The arrestees include 107 university students, 82 children as young as 13, as well as 19 lawyers and 106 doctors. Nazari said authorities have been reviewing municipal street cameras, store surveillance cameras, and drone footage to track people who participated in the protests to their homes or places of work, where they were arrested. but held for weeks. The protests began in late December, triggered by anger over spiraling prices, and quickly spread across the country. They peaked on January 8th and 9th, when hundreds of thousands of people in more than 190 cities and towns across the country took to the streets. Security forces responded by unleashing unprecedented violence. The human rights activist news agency has so far reported more than 7,000 dead and says the true number is far higher. Iran's government offered its only death toll on January 21st, saying 3,117 people were killed. The theocracy has undercounted or not reported fatalities from past unrest. Gulham Hossein Mohseni Aji, a hardline cleric who heads Iran's judiciary, became the face of the crackdown, labeling protesters as terrorists and calling for fast-track punishments. Since then, detentions have been very widespread because it's like a whole suffocation of society, said one protester reached by the AP in Gulstart, a middle-class area outside the Iranian capital. He said 2 of his relatives and 3 of his brother's friends were killed in the first days of the crackdown, as well as several neighbors. The protester spoke on condition of anonymity for fear of being targeted by authorities. The Naqi sisters, 25-year-old Niusha and 37-year-old Mona, were first taken to Tehran's notorious Evin prison, where they were allowed to contact their parents, their friends said. Later, she said, they were moved to Korchak, a women's prison on the outskirts of Tehran, where rights groups reported conditions that include overcrowding and lack of hygiene even before the crackdown. Other people whose arrests were documented by the detainees committee have disappeared into the prisons. The family of Absol Jazbi had not heard from him since January 15th, when he was arrested at a factory in the southern city of Isfahan. Jazbi suffers from a severe blood disorder that requires medication, according to the committee. Attila Sultanpour, age 45, has not been heard from since he was taken from his home in Tehran on January 29th by security agents who beat him severely, according to Dadban, a group of Iranian lawyers based abroad who are also documenting detentions. Authorities have also moved to suspend bank accounts, block SIM cards, and confiscate the property of protesters' relatives or people who publicly expressed support for them, said Musa Barzin, an attorney with Dadban, citing reports from families. Medical aid group suspends work in Gaza hospital. Doctors Without Borders announced the suspension of some operations at one of Gaza's largest functioning hospitals after patients and staff reported seeing armed men roaming parts of the building. Nasir Hospital in Khan Yunis is one of the territory's few functioning hospitals. Hundreds of patients and war wounded have been treated there daily, and it was a hub for Palestinian prisoners released by Israel in exchange for Israeli hostages as part of the current ceasefire deal. The comments by the aid group, which is also known by its acronym MSF, are a rare announcement by an international organization about the presence of armed men in or near medical facilities in Gaza since the war began over 2 years ago. MSF said in a statement all its non-critical medical operations at Nasir Hospital were suspended due to security breaches that posed serious security threats to our teams and patients. MSF teams have reported a pattern of unacceptable acts, including the presence of armed men, intimidation, arbitrary arrests of patients, and a recent situation of suspicion of movement of weapons, it said. While the suspension occurred in January, it was first disclosed in MSF's frequently asked questions section on its website. It's unclear when the post was made, but the site said it was updated February 11th. MSF said it made the difficult decision after an increase of patients and staff seeing armed men in parts of the hospital compound since the U.S.-brokered October ceasefire was reached. The gunmen were seen in areas where the group did not operate. Attacks on health facilities. MSF said it wasn't able to indicate the armed men's affiliation. It said it had expressed concerns to the relevant authorities without elaborating, stressing that hospitals must remain neutral civilian spaces. It said its concerns were heightened by previous deliberate Israeli attacks on health facilities. Throughout the war, which began when the Hamas-led attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, Israel has repeatedly struck hospitals, including Nasir, accusing the militant group of operating in or around them. Hamas security men often have been inside hospitals blocking access to some areas. Some hostages released from Gaza have said they spent time during captivity in a hospital. While Hamas remains the dominant force in areas not under Israeli control, including Nasir Hospital, Other armed groups have mushroomed across Gaza as a result of the war, including groups backed by Israel's army in the Israeli-controlled part of the Strip. Nasir Hospital staff say that in recent months it has been repeatedly attacked by masked armed men and militias, despite police presence there. Police to be deployed. The Hamas-run Interior Ministry, which oversees police in Gaza, said officers would be deployed to secure hospitals and rid them of armed presence. It said it was implementing stricter measures to ensure patients' safety. While international law gives hospitals special protections during war, they can lose this immunity if combatants use them to hide fighters or store weapons, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross. Still, there must be plenty of warning to allow the evacuation of staff and patients before any operations take place. If harm to civilians from an attack is disproportionate to the military objective, it is illegal under international law. Aid groups and rights organizations say Israel has decimated Gaza's health system, forcing most hospitals to shut down while heavily damaging others. During the war, Israeli forces raided a number of hospitals, detaining hundreds of staff. Israel has also targeted the police in Gaza. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:30 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:30 p.m. And now we turn to national news. Lawsuits have long been a weapon wielded by Trump. Donald Trump has played many roles: real estate developer, marketer extraordinaire, reality TV host, candidate, and president twice. Another part of them that has been consistent through all of it has been plaintiff. Trump both threatens lawsuits and files them with aplomb against individuals, institutions, even the people who elected him. Sometimes the threats are just that, and no lawsuit materializes, and certainly Trump has found himself on the receiving end of many lawsuits and legal challenges. But his own litigious bent goes back decades, and it has continued during his time in the White House. U.S. District Judge Donald Middlebrooks once described Trump as, quote, the mastermind of strategic abuse of the judicial process. Trump, Middlebrooks declared, in a short-lived 2022-23 case against Hillary Clinton, is a sophisticated litigant, repeatedly using the courts to seek revenge. The president has his latest potential targets. His Justice Department is suing Harvard University not long after Trump took issue with the New York Times story about his fight with the school. And he recently threatened comedian Trevor Noah, who connected Trump to Jeffrey Epstein during the Grammy Awards show. But here are some highlights of Trump's torts and threats. Cohen, young Trump, racial bias, and the feds. Trump started in his father's real estate business. They attracted attention from state and federal government authorities in the early 1970s after prospective black tenants complained of being denied apartments. Eventually, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development accused the Trumps of violating the 1968 Fair Housing Act. At one point, investigators counted 7 black families across 3,700 apartments in Trump Village, according to Trump biographer Maggie Haberman. And a Trump employee later testified that documents had a special code to flag black applicants. But Trump dug in. Aided by his lawyer and mentor Roy Cohen, and he countersued the federal government for $100 million in 1973, equivalent to about $700 million today. They ultimately settled the dispute, but not until after 1975, after spending 18 months generating headlines in New York media to counter the government's case. Trump promised not to discriminate against prospective renters in the future, but the consent decree he signed included no admission he'd broken the law in the first place. Stubborn NYC tenants. Trump wanted to evict rent-controlled tenants from 100 Central Park South so he could raise the building in the early 1980s. They fought him, and in 1985, he sued the tenants' lawyers for $105 million, $300 million plus today. The suit got thrown out, and Trump paid the defendants' legal fees. Attorney Martin London represented one of the defendant lawyers, Rick Fishbein, and wrote in his memoir that Fishbein framed his check from Trump after it was deposited. Fishbein later became one of Trump's attorneys. Trump eventually dropped his eviction suit, redeveloped the building, and allowed tenants to remain there under rent control agreements. Net worth fight. In 2005, a decade before Trump launched his presidential bid, and as his TV career blossomed with NBC's The Apprentice, author Timothy O'Brien wrote Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald. The book alleged Trump was not a billionaire at all and worth between $150 and $250 million. Trump sued and asked for $5 billion, now $8 billion plus, saying O'Brien harmed his ability to make business deals. A New Jersey court threw out the lawsuit, and an appeals court agreed. Then there's the 2016 Russia hoax. Trump defeated Hillary Clinton for president in 2016. That did not stop him from making her the lead client, along with a litany of others, in a 2022 lawsuit that alleged a vast conspiracy to cost him the election. It was part of a Trump push against a Justice Department investigation of Russia's role in the campaign. The inquiry concluded Russia interfered in U.S. political discourse in sweeping and systemic fashion to help Trump and harm Clinton. But the Justice Department stopped short of saying whether Trump was ever involved. Trump was explicitly not exonerated in the final report, but he still used it to assert that, quote, the Russia hoax was a deliberate plot against him. Middlebrooks, the Florida-based judge who got the Trump v. Clinton case, disagreed, tossed Trump's lawsuit, and made Trump pay the defendant's legal fees, which combined with his reached into the millions. This case should never have been brought, Middlebrooks wrote in a scathing January 2023 order. A continuing pattern of misuse of the courts by Mr. Trump and his lawyers undermines the rule of law. Zizian's legal fight spans 3 states after the agent's killing. The violent deaths linked to the group known as Zizians stopped at 6 a year ago after a U.S. border agent was killed and 3 members were arrested on trespassing and gun charges in the woods of western Maryland. 7 of the group's members are jailed in 3 states, all awaiting trial. Police in Maryland quickly connected Jack Ziz Lasota, Michelle Jacko, and Daniel Blank to homicide investigations in California, Pennsylvania, and Vermont, after a landowner found them living in box trucks at the end of a snow-covered dirt road last February, according to documents and pretrial testimony. All the suspects involved are to be questioned regarding other crimes that have occurred across the country and have ties to the Zizians cult. Maryland State Trooper Brandon Jeffries wrote after their February 16, 2025 arrests, but their prosecutions have only inched along amid trial delays and little action in other cases. Called Zizians by outsiders, the young, highly intelligent computer scientists appear to share radical beliefs about veganism, animal rights, gender identity, and artificial intelligence. Since 2022, members have been tied to the death of one of their own during an attack on a California landlord, the landlord's subsequent killing, the shooting deaths of Jacko's parents in Pennsylvania, and a highway shootout in Vermont that left the border agent and another Zizian dead. Victims of injustice. Jury selection was supposed to start this past week in Cumberland, Maryland, where Lasota, Jacko, and Blank are charged with possession of LSD and possession with intent to deliver LSD, multiple gun violations, trespassing, and hindering a police officer. The trial was delayed until June. However, after Jacko, who also is charged with resisting arrest, fired her attorney, briefly represented herself, and hired a new lawyer. In handwritten filings, she's made sprawling allegations of rights violations by snitches inside the Allegheny County Detention Center and lies by police and prosecutors. In the interest of hope, justice, and truth, for the good of all people, and for the establishment of a true peace, the defense moves to dismiss this case, Jacko declared in 20 pages of neat, but almost indecipherably small handwriting. Their lawyers and the lead prosecutors have all declined comment or not responded to interview requests. Agent killed. Jacko also is accused of supplying the guns 2 other Zizians used in a fatal shootout in Vermont in January 2025, although her federal court docket starts and ends with the complaint charging her with lying to a Vermont gun dealer. In that case, Teresa Youngblood is accused of opening fire on Border Patrol agent David Mallon during a traffic stop before another agent wounded her and killed her companion, Felix Bockholt. The encounters happened hours after President Trump was sworn in for his second term, but in a Maryland court filing, Jacko sought to blame it on a culture of impunity she says is now evident in the administration's mass deportation campaign. Renee Good is probably dead because the regime has so far been able to get away with murdering Miss Bockholt and framing Youngblood, Jacko claimed. Good was fatally shot last month by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers in Minneapolis. Neither ICE nor Border Patrol responded to messages seeking comment. Jaco claimed authorities arrested the group to prevent them from exonerating Youngblood, who has pleaded not guilty in Vermont to murder and could face the death penalty if convicted. It is an act of obscene cruelty, despotism, and the mark of a tyrannical regime to use a bad faith investigation and the threat of phony charges to conceal exculpatory evidence, threaten witnesses into silence, or threaten to put an innocent person to death, all to protect a murderous Border Patrol human, wrote Jaco. The judge in Youngblood's case last week suspended deadlines for pretrial motions, citing the complexity of the capital case and noting that the exchange of evidence will include material related to investigations into other individuals in multiple jurisdictions. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:40 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:40 p.m. Ford GM workers to receive profit-sharing checks. Workers at General Motors and Ford Motor Company plants represented by the United Auto Workers will soon receive hefty profit-sharing checks. Under their contracts, the workers receive $1,000 for every $1 billion of their respective employers' annual North American profits. Eligible workers at GM will receive profit-sharing payments of up to $10,500, while eligible workers at Ford will receive up to $6,780. The amount the workers receive varies depending on their compensated hours for the year. About 47,000 GM workers are eligible for profit-sharing checks. Locally, GM operates a components plant in Lockport and an engine plant in the town of Tonawanda. The profit-sharing amount at GM is down 28% from a record high of $14,500 the previous year. The payments will be made February 27th. About 800 workers at GM's Tonawanda plant, represented by United Auto Workers Local 774, are eligible for profit-sharing checks. UAW 774 members earned this, said Teddy Maldonado, the local president, in an online post. These profits don't happen without work done on the floor. The number of workers eligible at GM's Lockport plant could not be obtained. GM says the plant has a total of 1,500 workers, but the automaker would not specify how many of them are hourly employees. At Ford, the profit-sharing checks were down 34% from 10,208 last year. About 650 workers at the company's Hamburg stamping plant are eligible for the local checks, according to UAW Local 897. Weiland investing in Buffalo plant. Weiland Group plans to invest $2.85 million in its Buffalo plant, a project that would enable the company to shift some of its production here. Weiland will buy 2 new cupping press machines for the mill along Military Road in the West Hurdle neighborhood, according to documents posted by the New York Power Authority. The brass cups are used to form the casings for military and commercial ammunition products. The project would enable Weiland to acquire a significant portion of the Missouri-based Lake City Army ammunition plant's cup business, which is currently produced at Weiland's East Alton, Illinois facility, the Power Authority said. The Power Authority Board of Trustees approved a low-cost power allocation of 510 kilowatts to support the project. Weiland pledged to add at least 6 jobs to its workforce of about 500 employees. Germany-based Weiland acquired the plant from Arubis in 2024. Nidex Monosystems plans $15 million expansion. Nidex Monosystems is preparing for $15 million in expansion of its South Buffalo manufacturing facility. The project will add 45,000 square feet to the company's location at 180 Hopkins Street, expanding its size by 65%. The expansion is expected to be completed by the end of the year. Nidex Monosystems makes cable management systems, including ladder trays and basket trays, used in installations. The investment is by the Abnex joint venture, which consists of Nidex and ABB. The company plans to add 15 jobs at the plant as a result of the expansion, and David Kern, Abnex's marketing and communications director, said. New leader for Buffalo Manufacturing Works. The nonprofit organization that runs Buffalo Manufacturing Works has a new leader. Stephen Kelly was named president and CEO of EWI, which is based in Columbus, Ohio. Kelly most recently served as CEO of the Indiana Innovation Institute, where he was credited with building a startup applied research organization from the ground up. I'm excited to join EWI at a time when its mission is more important than ever, Kelly said in a statement. EWI has a unique ability to translate advanced technology into practical solutions that strengthen U.S. industry and national competitiveness. Kelly succeeded Henry Salone, who led EWI since 2005. Salone announced last year he was retiring. EWI operates Buffalo Manufacturing Works, a research center established in 2014 by New York State to help manufacturers innovate and improve their operations. Salone moved to Western New York to directly oversee Buffalo Manufacturing Works during his tenure. Kelly will be based in Columbus. And Caplugs adds silo. How does Caplugs benefit from installing a 24-foot-tall silo at its North Buffalo plant? For one, the maker of plastic components can feed raw material into the manufacturing floor more efficiently. The new silo can store 60,000 pounds of material. Caplugs said the additional silo is also good for the environment. It allows for more bulk material delivery that will reduce overall truck traffic and deliveries to the Elmwood Avenue facility. Caplugs is headquartered in Buffalo. The local facility, which employs 500 people, makes products that protect hydraulic hoses on heavy equipment used in agriculture, construction, and mining operations. The company declined to disclose the cost of the project. It's the fourth silo the company has on the site. And now, on to personal finance. Keys to success. 5 trends in the car market, plus tips for shopping for a new ride right now. In recent years, a shortage of vehicles, rising prices, and high borrowing costs made it a challenge for some people to purchase a newer used vehicle. Thankfully, the automotive market is shifting in ways that could be beneficial if you're planning to buy a vehicle in the next few months. The auto experts at Edmunds have identified 5 car shopping trends that you can expect to see in 2026 and have advice on how to take advantage of them to get the best deal. Number 1, more holdout shoppers are returning, boosting used car selection. Many consumers delayed buying a new car over the past several years due to high prices, limited selection, and expensive loans. Those deferred purchases resulted in fewer used vehicles being available for sale. But we're seeing that trend diminish in 2026. More people are finally trading in their used vehicles, which is increasing supply and variety in the secondhand market. That growing inventory can work in your favor. With more used vehicles on the market, pricing pressure shifts back towards dealers, especially on mainstream models. Instead of feeling forced to accept the only car on the lot, you can compare multiple examples of the same model across dealerships and use those prices as difference for leverage. The more time you spend comparing listings, the easier it becomes to spot an overpriced car and negotiate a good deal. Trade-in values remain unusually strong. One bright spot for owners who have held off on a recent purchase for equity for their trade-ins, says Ivan Drury, Director of Insights at Edmunds. According to Edmunds transaction data, 7-year-old vehicles that were traded in during 2025 were valued at an average of $14,400. That's a 72% increase compared to 2019, when 7-year-old vehicles were appraised at just $8,400. You can use that equity as a negotiating tool before visiting a dealership, get multiple trade-ins or purchase appraisals from online pricing tools and local dealers. Bringing those numbers will help prevent lowball offers and ensures you capture your car's full value. More money for your old car means you'll finance less and have lower monthly payments, which is especially important as prices remain elevated. Number 3, a surge of off-lease EVs is reshaping the used market. Electric vehicle leasing surged in 2023, and those EVs are now entering the used market as those leases come to an end. The result is a big increase in used EVs for sale this year. Many of them will have relatively low miles and significant discounts compared with new EVs. For shoppers curious about EVs but wary about new car prices, this is one of the best entry points in years. You also can look for a certified pre-owned EV if you're concerned about durability. A certified pre-owned vehicle, or CPO, has been thoroughly inspected by the dealership and typically comes with an extended warranty. With more used EVs for sale, pricing is becoming more competitive. As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That number again being 716-821-5555. Donna T. Adams, Marilyn G. Agnello, nee Gibson, Douglas Allen, Ronald Babcock, Donna Baldoff, nee Peterson, Carol A. Bauda, nee Bauda, Helen Bellinson, Irene B. Bonsack, nee Gorski, Ralph E. Cashdollar, Barbara A. Cavalieri, nee Savish, Donna J. Service, nee Wilk, Anita Cohen, Jed M. Cohen, Cynthia T. Cole, nee Bayer, Nicholas J. Contino, Rita A. Coughlin, nee Bulger, Judith Harriet Davis, Catherine M. DeTample, nee Wilson, Robert Bob De Orsano, Anna Mae Ervolino, nee Amaranti, David Gallmeyer, John T. Gartelman, Marcella M. Garris, Sr., CSSF, Colagero Gianforcaro, Valerie B. Gordon, Herman G. Grishkat, Carol J. Haggerty, nee Kramer, Robert H. Henning, Jane E. Henry, nee Ducarm, Al C. Hollins, Lovey Hoskins, Frederick King Keller, Catherine A. Kowalski, nee Nicholson, Horatius V. Lazara, Karen B. Leslie, nee Brennan, George W. Mallory, Susan S. Mizhikurski, nee Chajinki, Brian J. McGowan, Alexis Norman, Phyllis Faltzgraf, nee Ditondo, Margaret M. Pilich, nee Burke, Carl A. Potzolka, Patricia M. Pujolas, nee Zdanich, David G. Schoenthal, Loretta A. Schultz, Wozniak, Trudy A. Scott, Kathleen A. Kathy Scheffer, nee Gallagher, Lucy Syracuse, Giardina, Edward J. Japansky Jr., Charlotte S. Van Splendor, Eleanor Ellie White, Robert D. Wilson, Timothy J. Zajac, Ph.D., Bonnie E. Zimmerman. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us again at 716-821-5555. That number again being 716-821-5555. And now it's the horoscopes. Royal stars from Georgia Nichols. Happy birthday for February Sunday 15th, 2026. You're charming, enthusiastic, and kind. You value your friends and seek stimulation and adventure. Take inventory of your life this year because it's the last year of a 9-year cycle. The stars will show the kind of day you'll have, 5 being dynamic, 4 being positive, 3 being average, 2 is so-so, and 1 is just difficult. For Aries, you're having a 4-star day. Friendships are unpredictable today, or you might meet someone who's a real character, someone different, someone older, sensitive, and poetic or mysterious in some way. Tonight, ponder your goals. For Taurus, you're having a 3-star day. Tread carefully when dealing with bosses, parents, and the police because people might react to your behavior, or in turn, you might be surprised by the behavior of others. Tonight, you're admired. Gemini, you're having a 4-star day. Travel plans might change suddenly, or you might be surprised by news in the media. You'll also react in a rebellious way because you feel you want to do your own thing. Tonight, explore. Cancer, a 3-star day. Double-check banking details and anything to do with shared property, inheritances, taxes, and debt. Something unexpected might happen. Tonight, check your finances. Leo, a 4-star day. A partner, spouse, or close friend might throw you a curveball today. Alternatively, someone older might have advice for you. If this advice is suspect, ignore it. Don't jump in anything. Tonight, listen. For Virgo, a 4-star day. Your work routine will be interrupted today. This could be due to technological problems and computer glitches. However, power outages and staff shortages also might be at play. Tonight, work. Libra, a 4-star day. Parents should be extra vigilant because today is an accident-prone day for your kids. Know where they are at all times, no matter their age. Tonight, socialize. For Scorpio, there's a strong possibility that your home routine will be interrupted. Small appliances might break down, something minor might break as well, or unexpected company at your door might catch you off guard. Tonight, relax and you're having a 3-star day. Sagittarius, a 4-star day. It's important to know that this is an accident-prone day for you. Pay attention to everything. Be careful not to blurt out something you might later regret. Tonight, discussions. For Capricorn, 3-star day. Something unexpected could impact your wealth, assets, possessions, and earnings today. Check your online banking. On the upside, you might have a brilliant money-making idea. Tonight, check your belongings. For Aquarius, a 4-star day. Be careful, because a sudden argument might break out today. You might feel resentful or even rebellious if someone tries to restrict your actions or ways of doing something. Tonight, you're strong. And Pisces, 3-star day. Although this is a restless day for you, with both Mercury and Venus in your sign, you'll be clear, diplomatic, and charming. Tonight, privacy. And now for Today in History. On this date, February 15th, in 1898, the battleship USS Maine mysteriously exploded in Havana Harbor, killing more than 260 crew members and bringing the United States closer to war with Spain. In 1933, President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt escaped an assassination attempt in Miami that mortally wounded Chicago Mayor Anton J. Cermak. Gunman Giuseppe Zangara was executed by electric chair the following month. In 1961, 73 people, including all 18 members of the U.S. figure skating team en route to the World Championships in Czechoslovakia, were killed in the crash of Sabena Airlines Boeing 707 in Belgium. In 1978, boxer Leon Spinks scored a massive upset as he defeated Muhammad Ali by split decision to become the world heavyweight champion. In 1989, the Soviet Union announced that the last of its troops had left Afghanistan after more than 9 years of military intervention. In 2001, the first draft sequence of the complete human genome was published in the scientific journal Nature. And in 2013, with a blinding flash and booming shockwave, a meteor blazed across Russia's western Siberian sky and exploded, injuring nearly 1,500 people as it blasted out windows. You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Sunday, February 15th on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for this first hour has been Edwin J. Vieira, and for the second hour, your reader will be Florine Melnick. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we'll be continuing our reading of the Buffalo News. But tomorrow is President's Day, so the office at the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service will be closed. So our programming will be a little different. We'll be re-airing this morning's Buffalo News tomorrow morning at 9. At noon, in place of the USA Today, we'll be playing an episode of Fiction Two Ways about Valentine's Day. I hope you had a good Valentine's Day yesterday. From our friends at IAAS. At 1 o'clock, we'll be playing a history publication. And then at 4 o'clock, in place of the Buffalo News, we'll be playing an episode of With Good Reason. It's called The Grandmothers. And then we have a new episode of Travel with Rick Steves at 5 o'clock in place. It involves some Martin Sheen, some Florentine favorites, and I can't remember what the third segment is, but it should be good. Stay with us for these readings more throughout the day today. And tomorrow we'll be back with regular programming on Tuesday. But stay with us for the continuation of our reading of Buffalo News in about 30 seconds.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. This is from the local city and region section. Nursing home fined $177,000 in violation of residents' rights by John Harris. An oft-penalized Buffalo nursing home has been nailed with almost a $177,000 in-state and federal fines following inspections last year that uncovered violations of residents' rights, an instance of verbal abuse, and unsanitary conditions that led to an infestation of flies. Buffalo Center for Rehabilitation and Nursing, a 200-bed facility on 1014 Delaware Avenue, was most recently fined $8,000 by the State Health Department after a certified nurse aide in June shared photos on social media of 4 undressed, heavily soiled, and incontinent residents without their consent, in posts accusing the facility of a lack of resident care, according to a stipulation and order posted online Thursday by the state. In addition, Buffalo Center was hit with federal fines of $101,000 and $67,160 related to inspections last year, according to U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services records. Buffalo Center takes resident care, safety, and dignity very seriously, quote unquote, the nursing home said in a statement Friday. Quote, 2 isolated incidents resulted in New York State Department of Health citations and fines. The employees involved are no longer employed, and all remaining staff received enhanced education and follow-up competencies. Buffalo Center continues to work closely with regulatory agencies and internal compliance leadership to ensure ongoing adherence to all standards of care and resident rights, end of quote. The recent fines are the latest in a long line of troubles for Buffalo Center, owned by Bronx-based Centers Healthcare. Most significantly, Centers in fall to 2024 agreed to pay up to $45 million to settle a lawsuit filed by State Attorney General Letitia James that accused the operators of financial fraud and resident neglect at 4 of its nursing homes, including Buffalo Center. Independent health care and financial monitors have been in place to oversee those nursing homes since mid-2023, and their work is scheduled to continue through at least July of this year, James's office said at the time of the settlement. Buffalo Center, which has been owned by Centers for more than a decade, also has had an on-again, off-again relationship with the federal Special Focus Facility Program, a group of the country's poorest performing nursing homes that get inspected more often. Federal records show Buffalo Center graduated from the Special Focus Facility Program in March 2023 after a 12-month stay in the program. Now it is again a candidate for the Special Focus Facility Program, according to the latest federal list updated in late January. Since 2016, Buffalo Center has been fined by the State Health Department 8 times, totaling $56,000. That is the 7th highest fine total over the last decade among nursing homes penalized in the 8 counties of western New York. In the latest state fine, which involved the certified nurse aide taking and sharing photos of 4 residents without their consent, Buffalo Center was fined $2,000 for each of the 4 residents affected, bringing the total up to $8,000. Our next feature is UB's Global Food Fest sparks backlash. Bias claim apology by Stephen T. Watson. When the lineup for this year's International Food Fiesta was first publicized, the list named the participating restaurants, the cuisine they plan to serve to University at Buffalo students, and where in the world those menu items originated. Within days, however, and following pointed criticism, student government organizers removed the geographic information from the menu and issued an apology for offensive, culturally insensitive language in the text. The apology did not specify the offending language, and officers from UB's Undergraduate Student Association didn't respond to requests to clarify what prompted the apology and the changes. But some members of the local Jewish community are convinced the complaints and the SA statement targeted the description of the falafel bar and its food offerings as Israeli. The Amherst restaurant's owner, Oded Ravenpour, said he's disappointed he hasn't heard directly from SA leaders about what happened, but he never considered withdrawing from the food fiesta. Quote, "I don't want to fight with anybody. I just want to do my business," unquote, said Ravenpour, who is Jewish and is from Israel. Now, an event meant to celebrate the diversity represented in UB's student population instead reflects the political and religious divisions found on and off campus. Quote, "You certainly want to give credit to the Student Association for trying to bring everybody together," said Dr. Khalid Quasi, president of the Muslim Public Affairs Council of Western New York. Quote, "I think the question is what sort of precautions you have to take into consideration when taking such steps, realizing there are certain combustible issues that they have to be aware of," unquote. The International Food Fiesta provides UB's undergraduate students a free 4-day culinary tour of the world. It's run by the Student Association and its SA Entertainment Division, with organizers recruiting an array of restaurants to cater the event. The original menu shared on the Student Association's Instagram account, according to a screenshot that later circulated online, had an ethnic or geographic descriptor for the restaurants. For example, the final day titled Middle Eastern/North African promised food from 4 of them: Yali's African Restaurant in North Buffalo, Ghanaian; Falafel Bar, Israeli; Abyssinia Ethiopian Cuisine in downtown Buffalo, Ethiopian; and Mary's Kitchen in Cheektowaga, Palestinian. It's not clear who complained or what their concerns were, and the essay removed the original post from its Instagram page. The association's apology also isn't available online, but a screenshot of the message cited a prior post that was offensive, culturally insensitive, and not reflective of the values of your student government and our treasured student body. The 4th day of the International Food Fiesta went off without issue on Thursday in the Student Union on the North Campus. There were no protesters, just a long line of students waiting to be served buffet style by student volunteers and hairnets. Our third feature in City and Region is ex-barista fired for talking about pay Sue's Spock boss. After 8 years, after telling coworkers she was denied a raise and was fired via text. After 8 years behind the counter at Spock Coffee in Hamburg, Kristen Crissione thought asking for a merit raise was a reasonable thing to do. When a request was denied, she thought commiserating with her coworkers about it was reasonable too. Quote, "I wasn't shocked that she didn't give it to me, especially after 8 years of not getting one," she said. But she was flabbergasted by what she said happened next. Kathleen Wentland, the owner of Spock Coffee, Hamburg, fired Crissione via text message for talking about the raise refusal with her coworkers. At first, Wentland said Crissione, who also works as a pediatric occupational therapist, could finish out her last 2 shifts, but about 25 minutes later she texted again, Crissione said. Quote, "I thought about it. I will just take you off the schedule. This is a zero-tolerance rule, and my final warning on this subject was 2 weeks ago, and you still were not following the policy," unquote, Wentland wrote. 2 weeks earlier, Wentland had warned her employees not to talk about their wages with each other, Crissione said. The only trouble labor attorneys said is that Crissione's ability to talk about wages with her coworkers is protected by state labor law. Quote, "It's fine to deny a requested raise, but it's not okay to retaliate against the worker for discussing their wages with her fellow employees," said Beck Riedman, an attorney with Hayes Dultz, a labor law firm on Delaware Avenue, which is representing Crissione. Now Crissione is suing Wentland and Spock Coffee Hamburg for retaliation and wage theft. Wentland declined to answer questions but gave a statement. Quote, "The allegations against me are not true, and we will respond in the proper way with my attorney. Thank you," she said via text message. The wage theft charge stems from allegations that Wentland took a portion of workers' pool tips, another thing prohibited by state labor law. Chris Sion said Wendland took a portion of workers' tips daily for the entire 8 years she worked there. Quote, "None of us really knew if it was truly illegal. We knew it was definitely unethical and immoral, but we didn't know if it was truly illegal," Chris Sion said. That was a topic of conversation among workers, too. Quote, "It was mostly just the fact of she has more money than all of her employees combined, and she's still taking a portion of the tips," she said. But even if Wendland worked alongside her employees, which she often did, she was prohibited by law from taking tips, attorneys said. Quote, "As long as someone has meaningful authority or control over the other employees, they cannot participate in the tip pool," Reedman said. Chris Sion is seeking unspecified monetary compensation and reinstatement to her former job. Wage theft is a widespread issue in New York. Estimates suggest that over 2 million workers may lose up to $3.2 billion in wages and benefits annually, according to the state labor department. It is particularly prevalent in low-wage, high-turnover industries like hospitality and retail, where tens of millions of dollars have been recovered in wage theft cases. And while such employer violations are common, Reedman said it's not common for workers to know that the worker protections are in place to prohibit it. It's also not common that the evidence in the case is so clear, in Reedman's opinion. Quote, "You definitely hear a lot of cases where it's he said, she said, or something like that. You don't always get written text messages that put it in black and white like that," Reedman said. "So I think that is something distinguishing about this case. It's kind of shocking to see the brazenness," unquote. Though some Spot Coffee locations are unionized, Spot Coffee Hamburg is not. Hayes Dulce also represents Workers United, the labor union that represents unionized Spot workers. It is also representing workers in a wage theft case at the Hyatt Regency Buffalo, as those workers seek to unionize with Workers United. In that case, the lawsuit alleges that the Hyatt kept a portion of the service charge it imposed on banquet bills without proper disclosure. Our next feature is from the front page. Man sued ex-fiancé for cash, ring after split. A judge said no. By Stephen T. Watson. If a wedding is called off in New York State for whatever reason, and no matter who did it, the person who received the engagement ring typically must return it to the giver. There are rare exceptions, and Jason Dieterle found one of them. A state court judge recently ruled the Akron man wasn't entitled to get back the $5,300 ring he gave to his ex-fiancée because his own misconduct led to the end of their relationship. His then-fiancée called off their engagement in fall of 2023 when she said Dieterle attacked his father and her after consuming alcohol and drugs and becoming angry over a Buffalo Bills loss. Quote, "The plaintiff's very actions ended the engagement. He alone was responsible," State Supreme Court Justice Peter Allen Weinman said in his decision. Dieterle also sought $120,000 from his ex to pay him back for work he did at their home and for unwarranted withdrawals she made from a joint bank account, claims rejected by Weinman. The ex-fiancé's attorney, Amber E. Storr, declined to comment for this article. Lawyers for Dieterle, who is 50, said the judge dismissed the case prematurely, and they're confident their client will succeed on appeal. Unfortunately, quote, "Unfortunately, it's a bad breakup. He invested a lot, not just obviously emotionally, as we all do, but financially. And he's seeking to recoup those contributions that he made to the relationship and the house and their life," unquote, said Frank Lotempio III, who represents Dieterle with his colleague James Cassar. 9/11 call after Bill's loss. Di Turl said in his complaint that he and his ex-fiancée were together for about 5 years, starting in 2018. The Buffalo News isn't naming his ex because she claims she is a victim of domestic violence. She bought a home in Akron in June of 2019, and sometime later, Di Turl moved in with his 2 children, who lived there part-time according to court filings. Di Turl said he performed extensive repairs and renovations to the home and property, including landscaping, removing trees and stumps, restoring windows, painting, installing flooring, and plumbing work. He said he also sold the property and put the proceeds, just under $40,000, into his checking account and added his partner as an account holder. Court filings don't state when the couple got engaged, but they do cite the date when the relationship reached its end, October 8th, 2023. As Di Turl's fiancé later told police, Di Turl mixed alcohol with marijuana and unidentified prescription pills and became irate after watching the Bills lose that day, according to a Village of Akron police report. The team lost 25-20 to the Jacksonville Jaguars in London, a game that aired in the morning here. His fiancée said she asked Di Turl's father to come over to calm Di Turl down, but he threatened to kill his father and attacked him. When she tried to intervene, she said Di Turl punched her in the head and grabbed her by the throat. Di Turl was later accused of threatening to kill an officer and kicking a paramedic before he was sedated and taken to Erie County Medical Center for an emergency psychiatric evaluation. Di Turl was charged with assault, harassment, and resisting arrest, according to the police report. He pleaded guilty to harassment, a violation, and his ex was granted a 2-year order of protection that expired on January 10th, court records show. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next feature is in the travel section, Go With the Group, Finding Adventure, Friendship on a Woman-Only Trip in Asia by Lori Rackle. Light brown floodwaters lapped at the entrance to Vai's, a restaurant market and cooking school in Hoi An. Spill off from the nearby river continued to rise while we spent the afternoon at this popular tourist spot, learning how to make spring rolls and the sizzling Vietnamese crepes known as Ban Zao. By the time class ended, the streets looked like they were covered in iced coffee throughout Hoi An's Old Town, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We would have to leave Vai's by boat. This is definitely an adventure, quipped Cheryl from Cleveland, as we gingerly stepped into a wooden vessel festooned with silk lanterns and fake flowers. Cleveland, Cheryl, and I, along with 15 others, were on a Vietnam and Cambodia trip with Adventure Women, a pioneer in the rapidly expanding world of female-only travel. The U.S.-based company has been running tours exclusively for women since 1982. More recently, many of the big names in active travel, Intrepid, Backroads, Butterfield, and Robinson, also launched trips solely for women. They're responding to a growing demand for small group travel that promises elements of both safety and sisterhood. Quote, I like the camaraderie of traveling with other women, end quote, said Peggy from California. She'd been on 2 other Adventure Women trips before this one. Quote, I still keep in touch with the Galapagos girls, unquote. Fast-paced Hanoi. Our group ranged in age from 45 to 72, plus a younger Adventure Women employee, Emily, from Pittsburgh, who was there to make sure things went smoothly. Depending on the destination, local female guides usually lead Adventure Women trips. We had a man, Mr. Nam. This unflappable father of 2 looked after us like we were his children, but treated us like adults. Quote, ladies, stay close together like sticky rice, unquote, Mr. Nam would say when it was time to usher us across the frenetic streets of Hanoi, where swarms of cars and motorbikes can rattle even the boldest pedestrians. Quote, traffic in Vietnam isn't about waiting in line, he warned. It's fill in the blank. End quote. The buzzing capital city marked the jumping-off point for our 11-day trip, which called for using planes, motor coaches, and a boat to hopscotch across Vietnam. Our journey would end with a 2-night stay in neighboring Cambodia, where we'd be blessed by Buddhist monks and visit Angkor Wat, a sprawling religious site on many travelers' bucket list. But there was a lot of game to be played between that first sensory-overloaded November day in Hanoi and our tranquil sunrise visit to the most famous temple complex on the planet. A cup of Hanoi's legendary egg coffee helped shake off some of my jet-lag stupor as Mr. Nam shepherded us through the old quarter, where shops flanking the crowded streets sold everything from wedding cakes to tombstones. On the sidewalk, people sat in kindergarten-sized plastic chairs, eating bowls of mung bean sticky rice and fragrant pho, the national dish of Vietnam. Motorbikes whizzed by, the meep, meep, bonk, honk of their horns ingrained in the city's soundtrack. Leisurely island cruise. It felt good to escape the cacophony the next day on a 13-mile bicycle ride through nearby rice fields. Women working in the paddy put down their machetes to come over, say hi, and offer us snacks and tea. We took turns snapping photos of one another, with them in their conical hats made of palm leaves and bamboo, and us sporting bike helmets. The chaos of Hanoi faded even further when we boarded our private boat in Ha Long Bay, a watery maze made up of more than 1,000 limestone islands. The UNESCO site has evolved into a magnet for traditional wooden junk boats full of day-tripping tourists. Our 2-night cruise ventured beyond this crowded playground to the equally dramatic Bay Tu Long Bay, where we kayaked and bonded over sunsets and the ship's happy hour drink specials. A few of the women in our group were friends back home. Most of us had never met. Having a 12-cabin ship all to ourselves, we got to know one another quickly. Days started with morning Tai Chi on the top deck. They culminated with fishing for tiny squid near the stern of the boat under the stars. Shopping and a home-cooked meal. Back on land, we clung to the coast as Mr. Nam led us south, hitting highlights like the imperial city of Hue, more UNESCO, and Hoi An, an ancient trading port brimming with colorful lanterns, illuminated boats, and countless silk shops hawking quick turnaround, bespoke clothing. The latter led to some spirited communal shopping as we hit one another up for fashion advice. We mostly managed to avoid the punishing rain that's become more common in this flood-prone nation. In Hue, we had dinner at a woman's home where hundreds of her books were piled high on top of a shelf. She put them there to protect them from a recent flood. She left them there because more storms were on the way. The woman, Dr. Phan Thuan Theo, is a single mom, music scholar, and a descendant of one of Vietnam's last emperors. She showed us an upper section of the house where she was trapped for days as a child, waiting for floodwaters to recede. Her 86-year-old mother helped cook our multi-course feast, garnished in typical Vietnamese fashion with intricately carved carrots, cucumbers, and other veggies. New friends. Getting a glimpse into the lives of local women and hearing their stories adds a special element to female-only trips. At Vi's cooking school in Hoi An, our instructor, Lulu, talked about the challenges of raising a teenage daughter and the stress of dealing with major floods for the 4th time that year. More than she's ever seen in such a short span. The adjoining restaurant's heavy freezers had to be carried up flights of stairs. Reservations canceled. The water level outside was already ankle deep when we arrived at Vi's. Mr. Nam bought all of us plastic sandals at the market so we wouldn't ruin our shoes. On the top floor cooking studio, where it was dry, Lulu guided us through the steps of making mango and prawn salad. The 45-year-old chef shared a story about leaving her poor village in the mountains and coming to Hoi An at age 13. The owner of Vi's, cookbook author, and restaurateur Tri Diem Vi took the young Lulu under her wing. She gave her a job. Later, when Lulu got married, she gave her a house. "She saved me," Lulu said. getting a little choked up. She soon snapped back into work mode, beckoning us to the front of the kitchen classroom so we could get a closer look at how to prep and pour the batter for the sizzling crepes. Lulu surveyed our faces as we gathered around her cooking station. "You family?" she asked. We laughed and shook our heads. "No." "Friends?" she asked again, trying to understand what brought 17 women from the U.S. to her corner of Southeast Asia. The silence lasted a couple of seconds before Jill from Minnesota swooped in with the perfect response. "New friends." Our next feature is Asking Eric. Mother resents those who rescued her from financial ruin. Dear Eric, I have spent a year helping my elderly parents sell their house and pay off tremendous debt, mostly due to my mother's spending and hoarding. My father is unable to handle anything due to health issues. I have had help from my family, so I'm not alone in this. I am still very involved with helping them with finances and doctors. They are in a small rental now with no maintenance or yard duties. My issue is the bad feelings I have toward my mother after all we went through, packing her house, moving them, dealing with the movers, dumpsters, estate and house sales. She comments often about us taking things away and taking her money. Not true, but it is in safekeeping because of her very poor handling of money. She also makes backhanded thank yous attached to criticisms about the way we did everything. Our relationship was not great to begin with. I have started therapy and understand I can't change her or really have expectations of her, as she is just incapable. But I still have so much resentment and bad feelings toward her. I'm not sure how to move on. Resented Helping Hand. Dear Helping Hand, I'm glad you've started therapy. This is a long journey, but you've taken the right first step. Your therapist can help you sort through what's yours to own and what feelings or sentiments you can release. Your therapist can also help you set up boundaries with your mother because it sounds like that's going to be necessary. A boundary won't stop her from making remarks, but it can give you options for what to do and say and how to remove yourself from situations that are harmful to your emotional state. It's also helpful to right-size your mother's response. Her hoarding and her financial mismanagement were likely caused by trauma, perhaps trauma that happened early in her life. It hasn't been addressed, and so she's still suffering, but without the same coping mechanisms. She's also grieving the loss of her possessions, so it may help you to remember that some of this is your mother's pain talking. You can't take that away, but you can help guide her toward tools for addressing it. If she's open to seeing a therapist, that would be wonderful. You might also talk to a financial advisor about how other options for keeping her money safe. It sounds like it's not healthy for her to have unfettered access to it, but there may be ways for her to feel more empowered and for you to feel less responsibility for keeping her away from her worst impulses. Dear Eric, what do you think about a person that asks to come to your house for dinner, then asks for leftovers to take home? I was taken aback by this. This is a relative of ours. Home cook. Dear cook, I think it's a sign that the meal was good enough to want to enjoy it a second time. I'd take it as a compliment. And if you don't want to part with the leftovers, you could say no. Dear Eric, I would like to expand on your answer to Heirlooms and More regarding where collectors can go to gather information on the value of their antiques and other items. Certified appraisers are the best source for appraisals of valuable possessions. These individuals have specialties in different collecting areas and can provide up-to-date valuations under different scenarios such as replacement, auction, and retail shop value. Collectors can research appraisers online by visiting the websites of the Appraisers Association of America, AAA, American Society of Appraisers, ASA, and the International Society of Appraisers, ISA. Appraisers should not charge a percentage of the item's value nor offer to purchase any item since both these activities can affect the valuation. Major auction houses periodically offer free appraisal days. Finally, there are various price guides which report values of objects sold at auction shows and flea markets and shops. Dear Appraisal, thank you for this very thorough insight. Other readers also suggested that the letter writer reach out to a professional downsizer who might be able to help them get organized and connect the family with an appraiser. We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Our next feature is from the sports section. Stoltz joins Hayden with speed skating double gold by Howard Fendrick. Milan. For a while now, Jordan Stoltz's talent and dominance as a speed skater and his much anticipated potential for Olympic success prompted many to repeatedly mention his name, prematurely no doubt, alongside that of Eric Hayden. Now they really do belong in the same sentence, at least in one regard. Stoltz established himself as a two-time Olympic gold medalist midway to his goal of 4 at the Milan Cortina Games by winning the 500 meters on Saturday to follow up his victory in the 1,000. Those twin triumphs allowed Stoltz, a 21-year-old from Wisconsin, to join Hayden as the only men to complete the 500 and 1,000 meter double in speed skating at one Olympics. Quote, I guess it's halfway, but it's hard to say it's like a 50% chance to get the other two, unquote, Stoltz said. Quote, because you never know what can happen, end quote. Hayden, of course, completed a record sweep of all 5 individual events at the 1980 Lake Placid Games for the U.S., taking everything from the 500 to the 10,000. With Hayden in the stands Saturday, Stoltz finished the 500 in an Olympic record time of 33.77 seconds, after also setting a games mark in his win in the 1,000. Both times the silver went to Jenning Du Bois of the Netherlands, who clocked 33.88 in the shortest speed skating event. Both times they raced head-to-head in the same heat. Quote, we push each other. He's really strong. I'm also really strong. It's really cool to see, unquote, Stoltz said. Quote, I guess I like being paired together. It makes it more fun for the viewers, end quote. Stoltz figured the 500 would be his toughest test in Milan. He was leading out of the final curve. They were even entering the last stretch. But Stoltz, who overcame a deficit in the 1,000, turned down the speed and leaned across the line first again. Du Bois slipped and fell into the wall afterward, while Stoltz skated past and shook his right fist. Canada's Laurent Dubriel got the bronze in 34.26. The last American to win Olympic gold in the men's 500 was Casey Fitz-Randolph in 2002. The soft-spoken Stoltz acknowledges that, yes, his aims are high, and sure, he is flattered by the comparisons to Hayden, but Stoltz, who isn't entered in the 5,000 or 10,000 in Milan, also knows he isn't trying to recreate the same sort of unprecedented and all-encompassing performance turned in by Hayden. Still, Stoltz does have a real shot at the 4 medals, maybe even 4 golds, he is seeking at his second Winter Games. Quote, he goes to the starting line, says Hayden, who's also from Wisconsin and, like Stoltz, learned to skate on a backyard frozen pond. Quote, and I would suspect he thinks he's probably going to win, end quote. Hayden greeted Stoltz when he left the ice with the gold after the 500 and gave him a hug. The first gold? Stoltz's father, Dirk, said Jordan slept with it on his pillow the night after the 1,000th. Quote, you see some athletes just mentally, they might be physically all there, but all of a sudden the pressure comes in and it affects their performance, Dirk Stoltz said. And I don't see it with Jordan a whole lot. At Beijing in 2022, just 17 years old, Stoltz finished 13th in the 500 and 14th in the 1,000. In the time since, though, he has established himself as the best in the world at his sport, including 2 world titles each at the 500, the 1,000, and the 1,500. And right now, Stoltz is so far living up to the outsized expectations and accompanying pressure that follow his every stride on the ice at the Milano Speed Skating Stadium, a temporary facility created for this event. 2 races, 2 golds, 2 Olympic records. Quote, "It just seems like he doesn't get tired," end quote, Dubreuil said. Quote, "I really don't understand how that's possible for somebody," end quote. Now there are 2 more races for Stolz, a 6-time world champion, the 1,500 meters on Thursday and the mass start on February 21st. The last man with 3 gold medals in speed skating in 1 Winter Games was Norway's Johan Olav Kaas, who won the 1,500, the 5,000, and the 10,000 at the 1994 Lillehammer Games. Stolz took to the ice to warm up Saturday about 2.5 hours before his race. He paused at one point to plop himself down for a seat on the low boards along the ice, retying his black and green skates and smiling while chatting with his coach, Bob Corby. No sign of nerves, none at all. Quote, "I wouldn't say it's a walk in the park," end quote, Stolz said. "I still have to do the right things," end quote. Our next feature in sports, Tourney Needs Better Format, by Mike Harrington. We've waited 12 years for the NHL to finally get back to the Olympics. Even endured the last year of hand-wringing over the construction process, or lack thereof, of Milano Sant'Agulea Arena. The tournament is finally underway, and as you might expect, Connor McDavid is blowing up in his first Olympics just as he does on a regular basis back home. National media on the scene are banging the pro-Olympic drum to excess. Call me an Olympic cynic, but this corner has one key question: where's the best-on-best play? So far, we've seen Sweden, Italy, Switzerland, France, Czechia, France, and Team USA's abhorrent preliminary schedule against Latvia and Denmark, followed by Sunday's game against Germany. At least Canada opened with Czechia and had to battle hard for a period. There's a chance we go through the entire tournament without getting a USA-Canada game when there's no excuse that we don't get one, and maybe even the 2 we're likely to see on the women's side. How can the International Ice Hockey Federation accept the NHL into the Olympics, and how can the NHL essentially leave its actual season in shreds from October to April for this kind of format? Right now, we have 3 groups of 4 teams, with each team playing the others in the group. The top 4 head directly to the quarterfinals, while 4 other teams get there via head-to-head qualification, quote-unquote, games. As noted, the group with Team USA is not going to offer much resistance, nor is Canada's with Switzerland, Czechia, and France. Thus far, the only interesting play has been in the Group B quartet of Sweden, Finland, and Slovakia, and overmatched host Italy, which has no NHL players. So all that pool play guaranteed us was a Sweden-Finland game, which became a big problem for Rasmus Dahlin and company, as Finland bounced back from its upset loss to Slovakia, just on its arch-rival Friday 4-1. That's just not enough. We should be seeing Team USA playing with Canada, Sweden, Finland, and perhaps a couple others like Slovakia, and improving Switzerland. Under the current format, it seems like it might take into the semifinals for us to see any of those kinds of games, and look out for any upsets in the quarters, or we won't see them at all. Inside NHL, that's terrible. Go to 2 groups. Put the top countries together, and the upstarts on the other side. You want to argue the Olympics aren't about the haves and have-nots, and I'm going to tell you hockey is a different animal. Goodness. And it's noteworthy what the IIHF does for the women's tournament. 2 groups of 5, with the Canada-USA grouping all advancing to the quarters, and the top 3 in the other group joining them. But the pool play games remain important for seeding an opponent in the round of 8 game, as well as the bracket for the semifinals. If you did that for the men, you'd have much more interesting pool play games to watch. So far, you can color me unimpressed. After Sunday's Canada, France, and USA Germany games, we won't see the 2 main countries again until Wednesday's quarterfinals. The semifinals are Friday, and if we get that USA-Canada gold medal game too many people have waxed for, The semifinals are Friday, and if we get that USA-Canada gold medal game, too many people have waxed far too poetic about for too long. We get to watch it next Sunday morning at 8:10. The perils of playing in Europe in an overhyped tournament where the only hope is for a memorable finish after a week of relatively mundane hockey. Wholly disappointing. Well, that's the Olympics, buddy. With Fiala hurt, do Kings talk Tooch? And what did Canada-Switzerland give us that will have the most reverberation in the NHL? The serious injury that every team holds its collective breath over during this tournament. Los Angeles Kings winger Kevin Fiala of Switzerland was stretchered off the ice late in the game after an odd-looking collision with Canada's Tom Wilson, and for once the Washington winger seems to be absolved of any wrongdoing here. Replays were tough to see much, but it seems like a routine collision with a bad result, a serious left leg injury. The Swiss team announced that Fiala is out for the rest of the tournament, which is no surprise. Sportnet's Elliot Freeman reported Saturday morning that Fiala was having surgery in Italy and that the injury was in fact season-ending. Fiala was third on the Kings in goals, 18, and points, 40, and was one of 3 Los Angeles forwards to play all 56 games thus far. At a cap hit of $7.875 million, Fiala is the top-paid Los Angeles forward and has 3 more years on the 7-year, $55,125,000 contract he signed with the club in 2022. Remember that the Kings are only paying about $5.8 million on Artemi Panarin this year, with the Rangers retaining half his salary on the final year of his deal. The Kings hit the Olympic break 3 points out of the playoffs. In both the West's wild card race and the sprint to the top 3 of the Pacific Division, Coach Jim Hiller's status is tenuous at best. It seems plausible the Kings will put Fiala on season-ending LTIR and go shopping for forward depth at the trade deadline. Something tells me Sabres GM Jarmo Kekalainen is going to hear from Los Angeles counterpart Ken Holland about the status of Alex Tuch in the wake of the Fiala injury. The Sabres, of course, should say no. They need to keep negotiating an extension with Tuch and, barring an agreement on a new deal, should simply be using him as an own rental and not pawning him off unless it's some sort of major hockey trade we can't anticipate. Remember that the NHL is on a trade freeze through 11:59 p.m. on February 22nd, so things will be quiet in the league until several hours after the medals have been awarded in Milan. Our next feature is in baseball. Yankees Cole on track to come back. Associated Press. New York Yankees ace Garrett Cole threw his first bullpen of spring training on Friday, may pitch in exhibition games, and is on track to return to regular season action from May to September. A 35-year-old right-hander, Cole had Tommy John surgery March 11th with Los Angeles Dodgers team physician Dr. Neil L. Atraish. Quote, "We've had a lot of discussions between myself, the Yankees, and Dr. L. Atraish," unquote, Cole said. Quote, "With a full Tommy John reconstruction surgery, the target's always been 14, 18 months, so that really hasn't changed, and that's what the research says," unquote. Yankees manager Aaron Boone won't push for an early return, preferring to have Cole at optimum strength late in the season and October. Quote, "We want to make sure we give him the proper time to make sure he is good and ready to come back, built up in a smart way," unquote, Boone said. Quote, "We don't want to speed things up for the sake of a couple starts at the front end that could affect the overall product," end quote. Cole threw his first bullpen in October following surgery. He pitched at Steinbrenner Field with a beard. The Yankees relaxed their facial hair policy last year. Quote, "It's been long and tedious, like most people's experiences. As we get closer to the end, things start to gain a little momentum," Cole said. "I just kind of am doing exactly what I've been told. So when I'm told to push, I push. When I'm told not to, I don't," end quote. Thus far, his elbow feels better than it did 2 years ago. It feels really good, he said. It feels different than it has been in quite some time. Boone was pleased. Everything looks like it's coming out free and easy. Command. He just looks to be in a really good place, Boone said. You know that diver that dives off the high board and then just goes in the water and makes like no splash? That's Garrett on the mound. Cole altered his wind-up, putting his hands over his head. Before he was hurt, he stopped at his chest. It feels good, he said, just throwing on the backfields during the summer and tried it out. I've had little idiosyncrasies that have changed over the years from still hands to a drop or hands off the body, close to the body. I think I generally just like the rhythm of it. Our next feature is Bill's Mailbag by Jay Skierski. Would position switch benefit Taron Johnson? Welcome back to this week's Bill's Mailbag. Let's get right to your questions. Paul in Amherst asks, the Bills are going to a 3-4 defensive system. A player like Taron Johnson is not a good candidate to be one of the linebackers. He is an intelligent football player with good coverage, ability, and a very good tackler. Would the Bills possibly try him as a safety? Jay, it's an interesting idea. There are 2 questions the coaching staff would have to answer. Does he have the foot speed to cover the deep part of the field? And is he big enough to come down into the box and defend the run? If the answer is yes to both of those questions, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of trying Johnson at safety. If not, leaving him at nickel cornerback is an option. If that's the case, the Bills would be wise to seek a pay cut on Johnson's part. He signed 2 contract extensions with the team heading into his 9th season. He made one of the biggest plays in franchise history. He's been a great player for the team, but his play took a step back last season. That needs to be reflected in his salary. Another thing to consider is how the Bills view Jordan Hancock. If the coaching staff thinks he's ready for a starting role at either nickel cornerback or safety, it could impact Johnson's future with the team. Boba Boy in Williamsville asks, how come the Bills could not interview Clint Kubiak because Seattle was still playing, yet Vegas must have, because almost immediately after the Super Bowl, Kubiak announced his intentions to sign with them. The rule seems arbitrary. J. Kubiak interviewed with the Raiders before the divisional round, when the Bills were still playing. By the time Buffalo had an opening, Seattle had advanced to the conference championship round. At that point, teams could not conduct first interviews with candidates, so the Bills couldn't talk to Kubiak until after the Super Bowl. However, in what seems like a loophole the league should close, teams can conduct second interviews with the candidate of coaches on teams in the conference championship games. The entire timeline of teams hiring new coaches is goofy and to be addressed by the league to make it as fair a process as possible for all teams. Those looking for coaches and those with coaches in the playoffs who undoubtedly prefer their employees to be 100% focused on the task at hand. David S. asks, after Tom Brady would not even support one of his ex-teams playing in the Super Bowl, how much longer can he carry on the embarrassing and legitimate conflict of part team owner and broadcast commentator? Shouldn't he pick one and rebuild his credibility? J. The NFL should absolutely make him pick one. As for his credibility, how much of that can he really have when the guy who claims to have never sipped a cup of coffee or is afraid of eating tomatoes because it doesn't fit into his TB12 method is now all of a sudden a pitchman for Pizza Hut? Brady is a hypocrite. He has no credibility. He's afraid of offending someone, which is how he lands at saying he's got no dog in the fight for the Super Bowl, despite one of the participating teams being the one he spent 20 years playing for, and in turn manages to offend everyone with a brain. Don't listen to anything he says. Our next feature is Brady's breakout. In 2019, Joe Brady rose from unknown low-level coach to architect of the greatest offense in college football history. Lessons from that season helped prepare him to take over as the Bills' new coach. A commanding Cajun drawl boomed through the headset of each LSU coach as the football fluttered through the air on a kickoff inside the Superdome in New Orleans. Quote, "Now, God damn it, let's go," end quote. Tigers head coach Ed Orgeron barked into the microphone, red-faced with LSU trailing Clemson by 10 points. In the second quarter of the national championship game on January 13, 2020, Orgeron, the Bayou-born architect who revived the LSU program, had few reasons to lose his temper during the Tigers' storybook 2019 season. The LSU's prolific offense shattered records, and its defense put quarterbacks in a bind with a championship-quality blend of speed and tenacity. The Tigers swept their SEC schedule, winning those 9 pressure-packed games by an average of 22.2 points. Each mistake that night slowly chipped away at Orgeron's patience, and he sensed a frantic energy among his coaches. As Orgeron watched the kickoff, a measured voice spoke through the coaches' headsets. A few words from Joe Brady, LSU's pass game coordinator and wide receivers coach, steadied everyone amid the chaos. Quote, "Hey, nobody panic. Stick to the game plan," end quote, Orgeron recalled during a phone interview with the Buffalo News. Quote, "Man, was he right. I wasn't happy on that headset. That was a calming factor. Somebody had an answer. Somebody was confident. That right there shows his leadership under pressure," end quote. LSU scored 21 points in less than 10 minutes, finishing its remarkable 15-0 season with a 42-25 victory over Clemson. Just 5 months earlier, Brady had never called a play at any level. He wasn't even 30 years old when Orgeron chose him to modernize LSU's pro-style offense. But youth and inexperience did not matter to the best recruiter in college football. Orgeron believed in Brady's intelligence, relationship-building skills, and humility. Throughout 2019, as Brady transitioned from quality control coach with the NFL's New Orleans Saints to first-time play caller at an SEC powerhouse, small moments illustrated his ability to learn at an exponential rate and apply the knowledge that he's gained through tireless work. The lessons and insight from LSU will be applicable as Brady prepares to lead the Buffalo Bills as their head coach. And for the first time since their championship run, Orgeron and several of his assistants reflected on the ways Brady proved that his ascent was just beginning. Quote, "I know I don't have all the answers," Brady said shortly after he was announced as the Bills' new head coach. Quote, "I work my hardest to figure out as much as I can and process as much as I can. You don't get experience without getting experience. So I don't put any added pressure on myself anytime I go into a role of something that I haven't done, because I know I'm not supposed to be, quote unquote, ready for that. As long as I work my hardest and prepare, I fear not being prepared. Everything will take care of itself." Our next feature is scores and standings. And let's look at the hockey, the NHL conference and divisional points at the Winter Olympic break. So in the Eastern Conference, we have Tampa Bay with 55 points, 37 wins, and 14 losses. Montreal, 57 points, 32 wins, 17 losses. Detroit, 58 with 33 wins and 19 losses. Buffalo, 57 with 32 wins and 19 losses. Boston, 57 with 32 wins and 20 losses. Ottawa, 57 with 28 wins and 22 losses. Toronto, 57 with 27 wins and 21 losses. Florida, 57 with 29 wins and 25 losses. The Metropolitan Division, that was the Atlantic Division. The Metropolitan Division, Carolina on top, 57, 36 wins, 15 losses. Pittsburgh, 56 with 29 wins and 15 losses. The New York Islanders, 58 with 32 wins and 21 losses. Columbus, 56, 29 wins, 20 losses. Washington, 59, 29 wins and 23 losses. New Jersey, New Jersey 57, 28 wins and 27 losses. New York Rangers 57 with 22 wins and 29 losses. In the Western Conference, we have Colorado on top, 55, 37 wins and 9 losses. Minnesota at 58, 34 wins, 14 losses. Dallas 57, 34 wins, 14 losses. Utah 57, 30 wins and 23 losses. Nashville 57, 26 wins and 24 losses. Chicago 57, 22 wins, 26 losses. Winnipeg 56, 22 wins, 26 losses. And St. Louis 57, 20 wins and 28 losses. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Sunday, February 15th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been Florine and Edwin. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of Buffalo Magazine. Following that at noon is the Sunday Gusto. And at 1 o'clock is the Sunday front section of the New York Times. Stay with us for these readings and more. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another